Hey everyone, welcome to another Yellow Door video. I'm Daphne. Today we're diving into an exercise of self-discovery. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're splitting today's exercise into two parts. It's essential to keep an open mind for this, just like anything that taps into your unconscious mind. You won't be overanalyzing. It's more about observing and feeling. We often think we know ourselves, right? We believe we understand who we are, but the truth is, not entirely. If we did, we wouldn't act against our own desires or be surprised by what we're capable of. So let's get started. First, relax. Find a quiet space where you can focus a little, nothing too intense. I'm going to guide you to visualize something. It will just come to you, okay? You won't need to search for it. It'll appear naturally. The first image that comes to mind is the right one. We're going to do this without judgment so we can better understand our deeper selves. Here's the first part. Think of an animal you absolutely love, an animal you admire or find beautiful, fascinating, or captivating in some way. The first one that comes to mind is probably it. Don't overthink it, just let it appear. Now that you have your animal in mind, observe it. What is it about this animal that attracts you? What characteristic stands out? Why do you find it so fascinating? What quality does this animal have that you find so appealing? All right, now for the second part, I'll help you break down the results later. It's all very personal, but I'll explain how to interpret it. Now let's continue with part two. Take that animal you love with the characteristic that most stands out to you. Now set it aside. Once again, without judgment, visualize an animal you absolutely hate. The first one that comes to mind is it. Trust me. Whether it disgusts you or scares you, whatever the reason, let that animal come to mind. Now do the same thing. Look at this animal you despise. What about it makes you feel such strong negative emotions? What characteristic does it have that you find most repulsive? Think about it. Why does this animal trigger you so much? What's the most odious trait it has? That's the exercise. And I know you might be thinking, Daphne, this is weird. Stay with me. I'm going to explain the results and show you how to work through them. I never share an exercise just for fun. It's always something you can use to grow. I'll share my own examples now, and I actually laughed when I did this exercise myself. Let's break it down together. So stay focused on your examples. You'll hear mine, but don't let them influence you. You've already made your choices, and you've identified the characteristics of the animals, the one you love and the one you hate. Don't be swayed. When I did this exercise, the animal I love and admire wasn't one I typically think about. Funny enough, a polar bear came to mind. I don't usually think about polar bears, but that's why I said the first animal that appears is the one, because we're working with the unconscious here. It's bringing something to the surface. So I saw a polar bear standing on ice. I began observing it, and it was strange because I don't usually think about polar bears at all. Normally, I'd consider animals that are more common in my thoughts. And then the polar bear appeared. As I looked at it, I began to feel the characteristic I love most about this animal. What is it that makes it so captivating? As I watched, two qualities stood out to me, independence and strength. But it was really the polar bear's independence that struck me. That's the trait that resonated the most. I could see it in how the polar bear survives, catching its own fish, taking care of itself, wandering alone through the vast white snow. It's powerful, but its power comes from its independence. That's the feeling I got. Now, someone else could have looked at the polar bear and thought it was cute or something entirely different, but that's irrelevant. What matters is the trait you see in the animal, because that's the key to the exercise. So here's where the deeper meaning comes in. Just like I'm reflecting on the polar bear, you need to reflect on your animal. What's the next step? The analysis. The trait you admire most in that animal, you have it within yourself. But here's the thing. You're not letting it come through. You're going against it. For me, this was a real eye-opener and an important discovery. Independence has always been essential to me, but when I did this exercise, I was going through a phase where I felt off balance, emotionally tangled up in something someone else was doing. When the polar bear's independence surfaced, it made me realize I wasn't letting my own independence shine through. I was completely dependent on this person's actions and their outlook on life. See how powerful this can be? The trait you admire in that animal reflects a part of you, but it's a part you're suppressing. So let's take it one step further. The next question is, why are you going against this trait? Let's dig deeper into the reason behind it. Once I calmed down and focused on that image of the polar bear being its independent self, I could feel that independence inside me too. But I also saw how I had been fighting against it. So I asked myself, why am I resisting my own independence? What's going on in my subconscious mind? What is my brain telling me when I try to be independent? What's holding me back? And here's the remarkable insight I got. If you're independent, you'll be alone. This is why subconscious exercises like this that use imagery are so important. They're for you. They pull answers out of you in a way your conscious mind can't. You're unlikely to sit down in your everyday life, analyze yourself, and say, I'm independent, but I'm stifling that independence because of this person, and I'm afraid that being independent means being alone. No, it's not something that comes easily through a rational, conscious process. You need exercises like this, mental triggers that allow those deeper truths to surface. These exercises catch you off guard. You're not doing a mental analysis. You're letting the answers come from within. And the traits you recognize in these animals help bring that clarity from your subconscious. So, to recap, there are 3 steps. Step 1, identify the animal you like. Step 2, identify the traits you admire in that animal. Step 3, realize that the trait you admire is actually part of you, but you're suppressing it for some reason. And the real step 3, ask yourself, what belief am I holding on to that makes me think embracing that trait will have a negative outcome for me? In my case, I realized I wasn't fully allowing myself to be independent, as I usually like to be, because I believed that if I became too independent, I'd end up alone. I was afraid of loneliness. So I allowed myself to depend on someone else, to accept a situation of dependence out of fear, to avoid being alone. I do this work. In other words, I'm just a regular person. And I really do this work because I know it works and helps. You've done the exercise and you've discovered what your animal has shown you, that you have that characteristic. Sometimes people do this exercise with me and say, Barbara, I can't believe I have that trait. For example, someone might see a lion and recognize how powerful the animal is, yet feel like they are worthless. But the exercise reveals you do have that power. It's there, but you're denying it. Once you see that, you can begin working on it, and that's where the magic happens. It helps you unlock that trait, which is crucial for you at that moment. If you do this exercise again in a couple of years, the animal that appears will likely be different because you'll have already worked on that trait and will need to develop something else. Now let's move on to the second part of the exercise, the animal you dislike the most, and the trait in that animal that you can't stand. Why do you hate that animal? Here's where the analysis gets tricky. This part will test your maturity because the trait you despise in that animal is a trait you have within yourself. Yes, you heard me. It's a part of you, but you're seeing it through distorted eyes with prejudice and negativity. Let me share my own experience to explain it better. This can be tough, but if you approach it calmly, you can manage it. The animal I dislike is a snail. I have a strong aversion to snails. Some people might find them cute, but I can't stand them. Snails, slugs, just thinking about them makes me sweat. I even feel sorry for them. But I can't deal with them. When I was asked what trait I disliked most in that animal, there were many options. I could have said they're disgusting or repulsive, but the trait that came up for me was slowness. That hit me. It was the slowness that bothered me. So what is it that I'm not accepting in myself that if I did accept would be much better? It's the fact that sometimes I'm slow too. Sometimes I take things slow, and it made total sense. Looking at myself, I'm often in a hurry, trying to get things done quickly. I push myself working late into the night because I think I always need to be productive, always one step ahead. In the past, I even struggled with impatience, cutting people off because I already knew what they were going to say, eager to speak over them. This snail trait was a wake-up call for me. It reminded me to embrace those moments when I'm slow, when I'm not at my sharpest, when I'm not racing ahead. Slowness isn't a bad thing. It's part of the balance. Sometimes we're fast and sometimes we need to slow down. I've learned that this slower pace is essential for building more harmonious relationships and reducing my anxiety. So the animal shows you the trait you dislike. Someone might say, but Barbara, my animal is gross. This didn't work for me. But here's the thing. What does gross mean in the language we use? When we call someone gross, we often mean they're highly selective, picky about everything. Being gross means you're very selective, but you're not respecting that part of yourself. You're letting everything everything pass by, accepting anything when you should be more discerning. The characteristic that bothers you in the animal is revealing something important. Maybe you're seeing yourself as disgusting, or perhaps you're trying too hard to be sweet and likable to everyone. But sometimes you have the power to shock others or say something that makes them uncomfortable, and that's okay. You don't need to always be pleasant and agreeable. So what your animal is really telling you is to accept that aspect of yourself. As I mentioned earlier, I thought this would be a quick video, but I wanted to dive deep and give you detailed examples. I still work on my polar bear trait, my independence. I constantly remind myself that independence doesn't mean loneliness. In fact, being independent allows you to enjoy life more because you surround yourself with people who don't depend on you for everything. And I continue to work on accepting my snail trait, allowing myself to slow down when needed. I hope you enjoyed this. Share in the comments the animals that came up for you. If you'd like to share this wonderful, enlightening exercise, you can do it with your kids, your partner, your friends, or even your parents if they're open to it. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope these ideas were helpful and gave you practical ways to improve your life. If you think someone you know could benefit from this information, share the video. By spreading these tips, we can reach more people and inspire positive change. Every step counts, and sometimes a simple tip can make all the difference in someone's life. See you soon and take care.